CBC stations in Labrador City, Happy Valley Goose Bay, Corner Brook, and St. John.
Here and Now with Karl Wells.
The federal Minister of Fisheries has turned down a request from the provincial government to change groundfish allocations for 1984. The city of St. John's loses in its attempt to get the provincial government to reduce a $6 million bill for firefighting services, and we'll speak with some loggers who compare the woods camps and conditions of the past with what they are accustomed to today. The federal Minister of Fisheries has turned thumbs down on a request by the provincial government to change the allocation of groundfish stocks for 1984. Pierre DeBané released details of the groundfish management plan today. He was supposed to do this in St. John's and was supposed to meet with his provincial counterpart Jim Morgan, but foggy weather stopped DeBané in Deer Lake. He held a news conference in Corner Brook, and John Penney reports.
The allocation of northern cod quotas highlighted the minister's announcement of the 1984 groundfish management plan. 266,000 metric tons will be the allowable catch in those waters to the east and north of Newfoundland. That catch quota already has been the source of a rift between the federal and Newfoundland governments in the restructuring plan for the Atlantic fishery. DeBané's announcement did not make any gesture toward changing the allotments for foreign cod catches or the amount which can be taken to other provinces for processing. These are the amounts that has the provincial government upset. He said the allocation for the new super company is over 50,000 tons more than those companies have ever been able to handle. The minister said the foreign allocation is small, and the Newfoundland government is up in arms over a piddling 2,000 tons which would be processed in Nova Scotia.
When my parliamentary secretary tells you it's a question of 2,000 tons, this is it. When I talk to them and say, well, what are you arguing against? What make you unhappy? They said, this 2,000 tons. Well, I said, damn it, the people of Newfoundland should be aware of it. Because if you're talking about principle, let's talk principle. 87% will be landed in your province. If you're talking figures, I'm talking about 2,000. And I'm saying it's not preposterous, outrageous.
DeBané said if the Newfoundland government is willing to jeopardize the fishery restructuring agreement over that small percentage of northern cod, it will have to make a full explanation to the people of the province. John Penney, CBC News, Corner Brook.
And still in the Corner Brook area, rain and high winds hit western Newfoundland early today. Transportation was disrupted, but there were no reports of serious incidents. Jerry Jones has more in this story.
Despite heavy rains and melting snow, surprisingly little flooding occurred. In Corner Brook, there were large ponds created on some streets because storm drains were clogged by ice. Work crews and equipment were on the job early, however, and trouble spots were cleared up as they developed. The city's Public Works Department says no major damage has been reported from flooding. There were problems on gravel streets, though, which became extremely slippery. Outside the city, the Highways Department reported no flooding problems. High winds combined with freezing rain closed the Trans-Canada Highway at Wreck House on the southwest tip of the island for about 4 hours. A freight train was also held up in that area because of the high winds. The water runoff appears to have been well controlled today, but more problems could come within hours as freezing weather is forecast. Jerry Jones, CBC News, Corner Brook.
The province's Minister of Finance isn't anticipating much trouble when contract negotiations start up with health care workers early next year. The provincial government plans to limit the pay increases of health employees to 3% and 2% during the next 2 years. While Collins expects the contract negotiations to be lively, he believes workers will understand that the government is financially strapped. But the Newfoundland Association of Public Employees claims the restraint measures violate the Public Service Collective Bargaining Act. The union is challenging the government's move in court. The Provincial Minister of Labour says a record number of workers could be employed offshore this winter. But Jerry Din adds that this will not happen if Newfoundland's new winter drilling regulations come into place. The provincial government has threatened to withdraw its drill rig permits unless 3 helicopters are added to search and rescue facilities on the Avalon. But Ottawa says winter drilling will proceed anyway. Newfoundland and the federal government both issue their own drilling permits, since each claims jurisdiction over the offshore. The provincial government won't be backing down on a large fire protection bill it's given the city of St. John's. The bill for 1984 will come to more than $6 million, up 25% over the last year. Mayor John Murphy says taxes won't be affected by the increased cost, but the city will have to find ways to pay the bill. Debbie Cooper has more on this story.
City Council got the bad news in November. Fire protection costs for 1984 were going up a lot. The provincial government owns and operates the fire departments within the city. They pay for their upkeep and the firefighters' salaries. The province then bills St. John's, Mount Pearl, and Wedgwood Park for the service. St. John's pays the lion's share. This year, the city paid nearly $4.75 million for fire protection. Next year, that figure will rise to more than $6 million. But Council has budgeted just over $5 million for next year. That leaves a deficit of more than $1 million. The provincial government has also billed St. John's for a back payment of $500,000 to offset unforeseen costs in '83. The total shortfall, $1,700,000. City Council is predictably unhappy with the higher assessment. Mayor Murphy says they were encouraged by a meeting with area MHAs this month, and he'd hoped to persuade the provincial government to reconsider. But at today's council meeting, councillors were frustrated to hear the province isn't prepared to back down.
Do we have to eliminate the monies budgeted and the far too sparse monies budgeted for the Band-Aid patching of the stadium for the children and for the adults of St. John's? There's a consequence of this. This fires me, Your Honor, this fire department thing.
The mayor says dropping some of their plans to improve the stadium and other such projects is one of the options open to the city.
There were all kinds of things like that for which we had set aside $2 million. Now the question the council will have to answer, since we cannot put up the tax rate, we've already said that, is will we borrow the $2 million? Will we defer all or some of these items? Or shall we cut back on some recreational services in order to have some money to do these things, which in my opinion are very necessary? So we have three alternatives, and that's what we will be discussing over the next few days.
While Murphy says he's resigned to paying the increased fee for next year, he's still optimistic that the $500,000 back payment can be waived. Council would also like to see the details of the province's budget for fire protection costs and their projections for future years. They want to know exactly how their money is being spent and whether they're getting the best value for the dollar. Debbie Cooper, CBC News, St. John's.
The widow and 3 orphans of a man killed in the Ocean Ranger disaster have received $1.2 million in damages from Mobil Oil and the rig's owner, the Ocean Drilling and Exploration Company. The award is the final and highest of 29 damage claims approved by the Newfoundland Supreme Court. The 2 companies are paying a cash settlement of nearly $500,000. A part of the money will be invested, and the final amount, with interest, will total $1,210,000. Nearly all of the relatives of the 54 Newfoundlanders who were killed in the disaster 2 years ago have settled their damage claims out of court. The payments amount to about $20 million. Fresh fruit and vegetables, to some they're a luxury, to others a necessity, and they're usually available year-round. But last week's frost damage to crops in Florida could cause delays and price hikes. And how will it affect Newfoundland? Deborah Collins made a few inquiries.
Today, the supermarket shelves were stocked pretty much as usual, the same quantities and the same prices, even a few specials. Actually, the week after Christmas is a pretty slow one anyway, so any real impact from the Florida damage wouldn't be felt until after the new year. One produce manager describes what you could see then.
First of all, what you'll see will go up will be your green peppers, obviously, and your cucumbers, and a lot of other fancy lines like lettuce and your spinach and stuff. They will go up, at least probably, I'd say probably twice as much as they are now. You know, depending, like say, on supply and what kind of damage is done to the crops in the States.
But both the grocers and the province's distributors feel it's too early to make any definite predictions. There are alternate producers for the grapefruit, tomatoes, green vegetables, and peppers, which are Newfoundland's main imports. California, for example. But what's available from there and at what price is still being worked out. But while those in the business figure we won't escape increases, they say they've weathered the situation before.
You know, it's happened pretty well every year before, and, you know, it's not something new. You know, shortages come about, it seems like every time the first of the year. However, you know, the suppliers seem to overcome it for us. They come out with the stocks, and, you know, the quality and the prices are no doubt probably going to increase, but I don't think they'll increase by that much.
The public, too, seems resigned to the idea. Will you still continue to buy?
Well, I think so. We need fruit, and if that's all is available, we'll have to buy it, I guess.
I probably will just stick to the basics, like apples and oranges and grapefruit. Like, I won't go to the, you know, the more expensive ones.
But last year we thought, I think they had the same problems down south. We'd had big increases. I didn't see any, so it didn't change my habits.
Both distributors and grocers are confident that if prices do go up, they won't go beyond the reach of consumers. But what exactly the reach of the average consumer is remains to be seen. Deborah Collins, CBC News, St. John's.
Eastern Provincial Airways will be meeting with its unionized pilots tomorrow to discuss a Labour Board decision ordering the airline to rehire the pilots. Last week, the board gave EPA 10 days to reinstate 45 unionized pilots and restore the rank and seniority of others. But both the airline and its 28 non-unionized pilots are planning separate appeals of the ruling. The EPA Vice President of Operations, Chess Walker, says the decision is confusing and needs clarification in court. The federal government has given $1 million in assistance to help the failing sealing industry. We'll have that story and others still to come on Here and Now.
This will transform the humdrum dessert into a sinfully satisfying creation. It will sanctify the taste of berries, glorify the homemade pie. It will convert the ordinary gelatin dessert into a hallowed thing. And it's from the makers of the wondrous Central Dairies products. Central Dairies whipping cream. Once you give in to the temptation, you'll discover a heavenly dessert.
There's nothing like all A's. McDonald's. And there's nothing left that tastes McDonald's. McDonald's and here.
Nothing like a hat trick, even now. Oh. And there's nothing like the taste of a Big Mac.
Still there's nothing like typing 200 words a minute. And nothing tastes like my McChicken.
McDonald's and you. Rich, right taste. McDonald's and you. Big Mac taste. McDonald's and you.
Be sure you win this new Teutons value. Play the Teutons Newfoundland and Labrador game. Look for the Teutons coupon included with your beautiful prints when we develop your film. Collect all 4 sections of our provincial map and get your next roll free, plus a free Newfoundland flag pin. See the Teutons coupon for complete details. Get the satisfaction of knowing your film is expertly developed right here in Newfoundland by Newfoundlanders using Kodak paper, equipment, and chemicals. Win with Teutons.
Your car has worked hard all year long. Before the trials of cold weather are upon us, have your car winterized at Colonial Garage. Their careful checkup will make sure your car remains a good performer. Need supplies of antifreeze or other accessories? Colonial Garage has everything to boost your car through the season. Appreciate your vehicle. Give it the attention it needs now, before the problems arise. Visit Colonial Garage.
And it's time now for the weather with Richard Beaton. And Richard, I heard a rumor that the forecast is pretty good.
Tell me up, Carl. Pretty good. No tricks up the sleeve tonight. Not at all.
Okay.
So it's a much better forecast. In fact, the forecast I thought today would be as long as my arm, but it isn't, which is good news.
because we have some good weather coming up for later on, especially into the weekend where I know a lot of people are interested. Lowest temperature in Canada this morning was -37 at Watson Lake in the Yukon Territory and 9 degrees above yesterday in St. Stephen, New Brunswick. Here's what we had today going for us was some snow in Labrador, some rain in the island portion of the province, and temperatures were working out pretty well too. A little bit cooler in Labrador, but somewhat on the milder side in the island portion of the province. Let's go now and have a look at our vista and have a look at across Canada's temperatures. Vancouver snow and -2 today. Edmonton was clear and -26. Regina clear and -22. Winnipeg cloudy and -21. Toronto clear and -9. Montreal with snow and -3. Fredericton overcast and 2 degrees. Halifax overcast and 7 degrees. And Frobisher Bay, it was cloudy and -28, where the wind, at least the wind, the sun now sets at 1:15 Eastern time in the afternoon. Those cold and long Arctic nights. Let's have a look at our temperatures then across the province. It was -12 this afternoon in Wabush and Labrador City. There's a low pressure system. It was -11, overcast skies and snow today in Churchill Falls. -10 this afternoon, -10 this afternoon in Goose Bay and Happy Valley. But that's where the snow stopped. It was mostly overcast and just -4 this afternoon at Cartwright. It was 3 degrees and overcast skies at St. Anthony this afternoon. Rain and 6 in those winds today in Corner Brook and in Deer Lake. Yesterday, snow flurries in Stephenville and -5. This afternoon, it was 5 in overcast with some rain showers and 5 in rain showers this afternoon in Port aux Basques. It was 5 in Grand Falls today with rain showers, 4 in overcast this afternoon in Gander. It was 3 degrees today in overcast skies in Bonavista, 5 this afternoon in St. Lawrence, and it was 10 degrees just a little while ago in St. John's. Last evening at this time, it was -5. And 2 was the temperature this afternoon at the rigs. Going along and moving at our semi-North American map here, this is the way things are moving as the low is done on smaller scale here. It's moving along and out to sea, fortunately, and we're having some clearing weather coming up behind it. In fact, the high pressure, though, isn't clearly indicated on even the satellite map, which we'll go and have a look here in just a second or two. Here's our satellite picture, and this is where we live, of course, with the cloud being rather extensive. And here's a system that's going to move up tomorrow to bring some showers and continuing rainy conditions, perhaps to the Avalon and East Coast areas. Other than that, though, it's going to move off, and we have a good forecast, or fairly good at least, coming up for the weekend. But here's the high-pressure area that will affect so many areas and bring dry and bright weather for the weekend coming up, generally speaking. Let's go now and just have a quick look at the board again. It's moving along, good weather behind here, and conditions are pretty well here. But there is a low-pressure system. We'll move up and bring a few rain showers to the Avalon and East Coast later tomorrow or during the afternoon of tomorrow. Going now to our forecasts for the entire province. We can begin with those and have a look at them. St. John's, Avalon, Burin Peninsulas, Bonavista Peninsula. Tonight, showers, temperature 0 to 2. Tomorrow, intermittent rain, changing to flurries by afternoon, 3 degrees the high, and strong southerly winds, but northwest tomorrow, which brings clearing conditions. For the east, south, west coast, central Newfoundland, showers and fog, temperature 2 to -6 degrees. Tomorrow, cloudy and showers, 3 to 0. The highs tomorrow, strong southerly winds, northwest winds tomorrow, and turning cooler gradually. Goose Bay, tonight clearing. Temperature -22, tomorrow sunny with flurries, temperature -14, and strong westerly winds. For Churchill Falls, tonight cloudy with flurries, temperature -28, tomorrow cloudy with flurries, temperature -20 in Churchill Falls, and moderate westerly winds. For Cartwright, tonight mostly cloudy, temperature -18 overnight, tomorrow mostly sunny, temperature -14, and strong westerly winds. Now, for Hopedale, tonight cloudy with flurries, -24 the temperature, the low mostly sunny tomorrow, high -17, strong westerly winds. Finally, for Labrador City, Wabush, a cold and blowing snow warning continued, -31 the low, mostly sunny tomorrow, but cold, -20 with strong westerly winds, and that's for all of western Labrador tomorrow. And that's a brief look at our rundown of our temperatures across the province, but good weather coming up for the weekend, mostly dry, certainly colder in Labrador, but cooler in the island portion of the province as well. And that's the weather.
The federal government has decided to spend $1 million to help the sealing industry in Canada. The money will go toward price supporting for the 1983 seal harvest. That announcement, among others, came from Fisheries Minister Pierre DeBané, who is in Corner Brook today. We have details about the price support program and reaction from the Canadian Sealers Association, but first John Penney speaks with the minister.
Mr. DeBané, how much of a commitment are you making now to the sealers in Newfoundland?
Well, a commitment on several fronts. One, to defend them before the different international organizations, to participate in exhibitions where we can exhibit for garments, prepare promotional aids, and today I'm adding another measure is that the Canadian government will contribute $1 million to offset the losses that have been suffered by our sealers in the past. And it will be essentially 80% of the difference between the 1983 prices and the average of the 3 preceding years. And I'm very happy to have obtained that for our sealers because they deserve it. They practice a very legitimate occupation, and of course those who have been trying to destroy their livelihood have been making more money out of the seals than any of our sealers.
How will the sealers go about acquiring a share of this $1 million?
Well, I assume that in the very, very near future, the officials of the department will announce the regulations how to get for every sealer to get his payment.
Have you any guarantee that the federal government will come through with more monetary support next year?
No. No, this decision of cabinet was based on a recommendation that I have received from the Price Support Board, and it was based on that recommendation that I have received. So we will have to wait for I cannot comment, of course, on what will be the recommendation or whatever next year.
Presumably, for the sealing industry to survive, there will have to be markets. Can you do anything about that?
Well, this is it. About markets at the moment, the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, jointly with the Sealers Association of Canada and the Department of Regional Industrial Expansion, we are studying other markets, other possibilities, other uses, and particularly the establishment of end product, manufactured product within Canada, in our own country. You have also Southeast Asia, etc. But I would be hesitant to give you all the details, so not to give munitions to our enemies.
I'm Ken Meeker in our St. John's Production Center, and with me is Mark Small of Wild Cove, and Mark is president of the Canadian Sealers Association. Mark, is that $1 million going to be enough?
Yes, I would say that we're very well pleased with $1 million because that's something about what was into the application, I think. And as you know, last year the sealant was only on a very limited scale, somewhere around 40,000.
It was bad conditions,
the ice conditions were really bad, so there weren't that many seals taken. Now, as you know, it's the Fishermen's Union that put in the application to the Price Support Board, so I think they should get some credit out of this too. But the Sealers Association has lobbied continuously on both levels of government, and Mr. Morgan has lobbied, and today, as a result, we've got this announcement, and we're really pleased.
All right, this looks after the 1983 season. There's a market for 1984, but you still don't know if you're going to get a support, if it's going to be necessary. But what about the long-term problem? How long is the federal government going to support the sealers? They can't do it. I don't think they'll do it forever, will they?
No, I don't think that fishermen really want the government to support them forever. What we have said, you know, give us 3 or 4 years. Stick with it and support the sealers. And then if there's nothing can be done for the industry, then, well, we'll have to take another look at it. But what the Sealers Association have been doing with both levels of government, we're looking into new markets, and the prospect for the future of the sealing industry is has a brighter outlook this year than it did for a long, long time.
You sounded in your release earlier very, very optimistic. You think this was going to get you over the hump? Is it going to do it?
Yes, I think it will. I think sealers were starting to get very discouraged, and they were calling me up and saying, you know, the government is not going to support us, so there'll be no seal fishery in 1984. But now that we've got 1983 out of the way, we can go forward into 1984, and I think that today the sealers will start to pull themselves up and say, look, our industry is going to be revitalized, and we're going to pull ahead with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And still with sealing, a Vancouver anti-seal campaigner has been released on bail from a Quebec jail and is expected to fly home tomorrow. Paul Watson has been sentenced to 15 months in prison for disrupting the seal hunt last March. Watson, who's the captain of the protest vessel Sea Shepherd 2, is appealing the jail term. The boat's first engineer, Paul Peswick, is also appealing his 3-month sentence. Peswick is also out on bail. Still to come on Here and Now, a trip to an Abitibi Price Woods camp where reporter Terry LeDrew speaks with some of the loggers about the past. That and more still to come.
Newfoundland. Nowhere does the sea enter more intimately into the life of a people. The customs, place names, and folklore reflect the solid influences of our past. And Walsh's Bakery is proud to bake a loaf of bread good enough for all of Newfoundland. Sunny Bee Bread. Freshly baked right here in Newfoundland. Sunny Bee Bread. Part of the neighborhood.
Radar's out again, Skipper.
That does it. Contact Coast Guard Radio and get me Gabriel's. We can't operate with this old equipment any longer.
Coast Guard Radio, this is it. Can you get me Gabriel's? Hello. I got him, Skipper.
Gabriel's, I need a fast quote on some new gear. Can you help me?
Oh, we sure can. I can give you prices right now for installation first thing tomorrow morning. That okay?
It sure is.
Gabriel's, for the best in marine electronics, navigation, and safety equipment.
Friendly, smiling faces, as much a part of an old-fashioned Christmas as the sleigh ride itself. The fine folks at Venice Pizzeria would like to extend warm wishes to all their customers, those who have made serving a top-quality pizza a pleasure. May this Christmas have in store for you all the joy and magic of Christmases long ago. And may the new year awaiting you be abundantly blessed. Best wishes from your friends at Venice Pizzeria.
Helps you keep your grocery dollars in line. Honest value, great selection, time after time. The General is holding the line. Honest value, honest savings, that's hard to find. Check our prices, then check us, we're sure you'll agree. The General has the lowest prices that you're likely to see.
The General is holding the line on inflation from 2 locations, Rope Walk Lane and Topsail Road.
Thank you for shopping at the General.
The General has the lowest prices that you're likely to see.
For many, the holiday season is both a time of plenty and of reflection. Tonight, a story about one of the big industries in Newfoundland, logging. Terry LeDrew recently visited an Abitibi Price Woods camp and spoke with workers there about changes in the industry.
The Loggers Union Hall in Grand Falls is more than just a meeting place. It chronicles the wood industry's growth in this province step by step. From primitive cutting tools used in years gone by to proudly framed photographs of pulpwood drives, it's all here as a reminder of how once men had to work to feed their families.
The conditions first when I started with Bowwaters, that's going back a few years now, the camps were all log camps, and they were, the seams in between the logs was all, we used to call it chinched with moss at them days. The sanitary conditions certainly left a lot to be desired. You only had one open camp, bunkhouse we used to call it. There was double tier bunks at that stage of the game, all wood stoves. I'm sure you've heard the expression, that during the winter months, for instance, the fellow in the bottom bunk would be froze and the fellow up the top bunk would be just about cooked until the fire went out, and then everybody would be froze. There was no sanitary conditions, as I suggested. You had to wash in cold water all of the time, and a lot of mornings when you would get up to go and wash, you find that you didn't have any water at all because it had all frozen up while you were asleep, The menu was rather limited. Some of the guys used to say that you could get beans 48 times a week, and that was pretty well what it was. But basically, you had, as I said, beans was always available. Tea and bread. Sometimes you would get some salt beef, salt fish at times. If you were real lucky, you got a slice or two of bologna, That's about it. So the camp conditions left a heck of a lot to be desired, I think, in anybody's standards. You know.
Meager rations and uncomfortable living quarters, and for months on end. Because when you went into the woods to work in those days, you often didn't see home again for a whole season. A life like that can do something to even the strongest of families.
I was married when I was a young man, 23 years old, and we had 3 children. And when I go home, after being away for 3 or 4 months, my children would run to their mother afraid of the stranger.
All of this eventually united the loggers to fight for a better deal from the companies. The International Woodworkers Association came in, but as many will recall, died a bloody death back in 1959. It did, however, pave the way for today's union, although Gonzo Gillingham will tell you it still wasn't easy.